right, so we're moving right along in our unit. Actually, I think we're almost done. I think there's only 5 sections in Unit 11. So if I'm at Section 4, we are this close to being done with the Algebra 1 curriculum. There's a Unit 12, but I don't have time to get into that unit. And that particular unit usually gets covered in geometry, so you'll be okay. So section 4, we're talking about solving quadratic equations with square roots. Now, the last lesson we did, section 3, you solved quadratic equations with graphing. Now, we didn't get into the actual solutions in the last section because that involves a graphing calculator. The last section, you just told me how many solutions you got, either 1, 2, or none. But today, you'll still see where the 1, 2, or none come from, but we're actually going to get a value. We're actually going to solve for x. So first thing we got to do is keep in mind what our standard form is. You got to remember this because it's very important to make sure that all your equations are in this form. So at the top of your page, you see where it says the standard form of a quadratic. I need you to write ax squared plus bx plus c. But this time, because we're dealing with equations, because we said it's an equation, we're going to set it equal to 0. You cannot solve a quadratic equation and let it equal to 0. So that's kind of like your magic number. So go ahead and put this in your blank, your first blank there at the top. Now, what's next is just walking you through the different ways that we solve quadratic equations. Obviously there's more than one way because in the last section we talked about how you use graphing to solve them. So we're just going to write these down. So you can kind of see how far you've come with solving quadratic equations. You were solving them and didn't even know it back in the last chapter. So the first way that we can solve is through factoring and the zero product property. So go ahead and write this down, the zero product property. Now, we did this at the end of Unit 10. Unit 10 is where I taught you how to factor. You use your X box and all of your answers pretty much came out like that. You had some parentheses somewhere. Well, whenever you had parentheses equal to 0, that meant that you actually had to solve. And the way that we solved, if you don't remember, that's where we set up our little T and we set each parentheses equal to 0, and then you gave me my answer. So we did that in Unit 10. We're not going to do any of that in Unit 11 because we're building on what you learned from Unit 10. Then the second way to solve is by graphing. And that's what we just did. Please remember that when you are graphing quadratic equations, your x-intercepts are the solution. They're the solutions. So you look at your graph and you see where the curve, where that parabola hits the x-axis, and wherever it hits that value of x, that's the solution. So we did that in the last section. And then step 3, the next way, is using the quadratic formula. And we're going to learn that. I'm not sure. I guess that'll be sometime next week. That's actually our last section. So, like I said, we're getting there. Using the quadratic formula. And then the fourth way, put a star beside it because this is where we're going to sit for the next few minutes. You solve by finding the square roots of the equation. So this is what our lesson for this video is about. So we're going to stop the video here. Hopefully you got all those ways. We're going to focus on number 4. And in the next video, I'll tell you what you need in order to